This is North Pod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Stevenson with his own moves. Carrington. North are in front.
Hello and welcome back to Therapy. I mean North Pod. Thank you for tuning in after another really long game to watch. Really appreciate you coming back to listen to this. I hope that listening to this is somewhat better than watching the game, because it's been a long couple of weeks. We've got the usual routine here. We're going to run through team selection. We're going to run through match result and story of the game. We're going to look at the 5 stars. We're going to look at the positives and negatives. We'll look ahead to next week. We'll have a look at the VFL. It's all here, ready for you to consume through your ears. So, as I said, hopefully this will be somewhat more enjoyable than the game. We'll talk about that in just a minute. In terms of team selection, there was a few changes. So out was Sheezel, Dawson, Zerha and Stevenson. Stevo was the only one that was dropped. Sheezel was out with a bit of soreness. Dawson hurt himself at training. Zerha had some awareness, I think, in his calf. But Stevo was out. And I think that's fair. He'd been pretty inconsistent. He'd not even inconsistent, actually. He just really had struggled to make an impact. So I think it was probably time. He'd played 4 pretty average games. I think it was time to give someone else a go. And yeah, as I said, the others were injuries, so nothing we could do about them. But certainly losing Dawson ahead of this clash with what we thought was going to be Hawkins, Cameron and Ollie Henry was a big loss. Coming in was Lazaro, Biggie Newen, Sellers and Drury. And then Lazaro was selected as the sub. So I guess Biggie was in to replace Dawson, playing his first game for the club, second game all up. I guess you could say Sellers was replacing Zerha, Drury replacing Stevo, and Lazaro replacing Shields at a basic level, as I whack my microphone. Obviously, all of them playing slightly different roles, but essentially filling those positions on the ground. Lazaro, I think, does deserve more of a chance at AFL level, so pleased for him, even though it was as the sub. Biggie, look, I think we need to look at him this year, so this was a good chance to get him in. And Sellers had been knocking down the door in the VFL, so with Zerha going out, it made sense. And then, Drury as our best performing small forward, pressure forward, that kind of role. Likewise, I think he deserved a chance. So I didn't really have any complaints at team selection, other than I would have loved Dawson to be fit. And sure, I mean, Zerha, apparently pulled up sore, but I think, to be honest, he's probably due a bit of a spell as well. So, going in, I thought, very low expectations of the match overall, but I think the changes were relatively positive. I think playing Lazaro as the sub, didn't work super well last year, but as it turned out, he came on pretty early, pretty much at the start of the second quarter, but due to McKerch's injury. So he played 3 quarters and was solid, so we can talk about his impact. I can't really delay it anymore, so I'm sure you know the result, unless you chose, your mental health and just decide to ignore this match, which, to be honest, I would respect. It was Geelong 139 to North Melbourne 64. Sorry, you will have to forgive my voice this episode. I've been on school holidays. Most of you would know I'm a teacher, and we're back to school today, so I've been using my voice more than I have for the past 2 weeks. So it's fading on me, but I'm sure I'll be able to get through the podcast. Yeah, it was a 75-point loss, so disappointing, not all that surprising, but certainly disappointing. We just were never in the game. The Cats kicked the first 3, and just consistently pushed that lead out further and further. It did get into the 80s at one point, but we kicked a goal or two late to drag it back to a much more respectable 75. In terms of the story of the game, it was a real 2020/2021 vibes game. I know all of you North fans would be familiar with those lockdown matches where we sat in front of our couch and just hoped that we didn't get smashed, and generally we did. And it had those kind of vibes about it from the get-go, and then just the game overall, it was, the sort of game where you zone out for 5 minutes and the Cats have kicked several goals effortlessly, and we got belted in every area of the game that matters, really. I think a big theme of this episode is probably going to be me describing things as though they didn't really kill me when they did. Because I honestly think I did dissociate a bit this week, and I think there's probably a few North fans that are feeling that way a little bit. You just have to go, it's at a certain point you go, I can't base my mood on this game because we all know how it's going to go. But yeah, Geelong just dominated us in the midfield. They beat us 38-31 in the clearances, and as per usual at the moment, their quality of clearance was far superior to ours. 61 inside 50s to 45, which, is probably not as many, they didn't win that by as much as the scoreboard might indicate, but I think we could all probably infer then that potentially we were a very inefficient inside 50 as well. Spoiler alert, we were, and I'll talk about that. We lost the contested possession by 13, so not a belting, but certainly beaten. And yeah, just time and time again, killed us on turnover. We were turning it over in really dangerous spots, often in our back half, which meant that Geelong didn't really have to work that hard to kick a goal afterwards. We tried to play an uncontested marking game and with short kicks, but we just weren't skilled enough to do that. We sort of made it work a couple of times, but invariably we came undone with a kick that we just didn't need to bite off, or that was the right option but wasn't executed well. As I said, we did execute it a couple of times and we were able to score, but it was just a real exercise in being outplayed in most facets of the game. Our midfield is supposed to be, or is touted as a strength of ours, and I do think it's probably our strongest area of the ground, but we've been pretty soundly beaten most weeks in the midfield. And yeah, it's becoming a bit monotonous, isn't it? It's round 5 now, and I know we've had a tough draw, and things do lighten up a little bit, but I think the challenge now is that we've been really belted 3 weeks in a row, and it's hard to bounce back from that mentally. I think we have to remember that as fans, we're feeling dejected and, frustrated and angry and sad and all of these negative emotions, but it's important to remember that the players are feeling all of those things far more immediately than us. They're living it. They're out there performing. They've got to go into the rooms and hear about how bad they've gone. They've got to go back to work the next day and, unpack why it went the way that it did. So whilst a lot of us do live and breathe North Melbourne, and I certainly, my calendar does revolve around the games, I do at least have other parts of my life that I can, consume myself in, whereas the players and the coaching staff, it's their livelihood, it's their 9 to 5, and it's not going well at the moment. So it's no good getting angry at the club and at the players and at Sonia. I know there's been a lot of talk about Sonia Hood in the last week and a half, and I don't really want to stir that pot anymore because I think it's disappointing what happened there. But yeah, I mean, like I said, welcome to therapy at the start of the episode. We just have to hold steady. We have to keep the faith that this really long rebuild is going to bear fruit eventually. And yeah, I guess when we get to the positives, I can talk a little bit about what I saw from that perspective in this game. Let's go to the 5 stars, where I also can talk about some positives. I think it's going to be pretty repetitive this year. It certainly has been for the first 5 weeks. Harry Sheezel, 4 votes. It's his 5th consecutive game to poll votes. And I could not fault him for his game on the weekend. 38 disposals, 15 marks, 3 tackles, kicked a goal late, 525 metres gained, which was the highest for North Melbourne. 6 inside 50s, 2 goal assists, 29 pressure acts, which was the second most. Went at 82% disposal efficiency, and yeah, just had a really complete game. Highest disposal count he's had for his career, 38. So, pretty hard to take the votes away from him. He did seem to play a little bit higher up the ground this week. Still had plenty of touches deep in defence, but when you look at his heat map and just the eye test in the game, he was getting plenty of it through the centre of the ground, and 6 inside 50s speaks to that. Just as per usual, rinse and repeat every week. I could probably just record my analysis of his game and put it in every episode at the moment. He was clean. He didn't make many mistakes. His inside 50 kicks did result in goals. As I said, he had the 2 goal assists, so 2 of those inside 50 kicks directly resulted in a goal. He was the complete player in a side that has nothing going for it at the moment. And, he was frustrated. You could see in the game, I can't remember who kicked a goal, but someone kicked a goal for Geelong in the goal square where Sheezel had made a last-ditch attempt to put some pressure on, and he smacked the ground in frustration, which, it sucks that it didn't work, but I guess as a fan, you love to see how much it hurts. You want players to be frustrated when things aren't going well. So just really hard to fault the Shees. Another fantastic offensive game. Did some good defensive stuff too, but we know that he's in the defense to get the ball moving forward, and he did his absolute best with that. And I think the more we can see him a little further up the ground, the better. We just can't, we need 3 of him. We can't afford to completely remove him from that full-back line, because otherwise the ball just won't get to him. But I do want to see him, I guess all over the ground, and we saw a bit more of that. So 4 votes for Shees. Eddie Ford gets the 3 votes. I thought he was probably our best forward on the day, certainly our most consistent. 20 disposals, 3 goals, 6 marks, 3 tackles, went at 90% disposal efficiency, so a really efficient game, and just, consistently provided an outlet forward of the ball, made the most of his opportunities, kicked 3 straight. Best forward on the ground for us, as I said, and certainly his best game for the year. We know that he's played a couple as a sub, so you would think performances like this would shore up his place properly in the side, you would think. It was a really good game from Ford, and it's sort of certainly what we want to see from him on a more consistent basis. I don't think he's going to kick 3 every week. That's probably not the sort of forward that he's going to be. But if he could kick 1 or 2 every week, and then every now and then kick a bag like this, and 3's a small bag, but in the modern game, I reckon you could almost get away with calling 3 a bag. But I think what I really value there is the 6 marks and the 20 disposals at 90%, because it shows that it's not just a Paul Curtis low possession, high impact game. He was able to kick the goals and also get involved elsewhere. So, super impressed with Eddie Ford. I thought he really stepped up in the absence of Cam Zerha in that forward line. And, really deserved his 3 votes. It was hard to split him and Drury for the 3 and the 2, but Drury got the 2. And honestly, it was just the extra goal for Ford that got him across the line. Drury played a slightly different role, 17 disposals, 2 goals, 11 marks, 2 tackles, 4 inside 50s. And he probably split his time more between the wing and the half-forward line, whereas Ford was predominantly that high half-forward role. That's why Drury had the 11 marks. He was quite often that outlet kick. And like Ford, just made the most of his chances. I think he's definitely secured his spot in the team for, a couple of weeks. It certainly doesn't buy you a whole season, but it probably buys you 2 or 3 bad games. I'm not sure that he is the small forward that we're crying out for, but he showed more than Steve-O's been able to show this year. And I guess what I mean by that is I don't know that he's super crafty or that he's going to apply elite pressure. I think he'll try his best. But I do think he's probably more of a workhorse. He's going to get to the right spots. I just don't know that we're going to see him doing something anywhere in the likes of a Charlie Cameron or a Bobby Hill. Like, I don't know that he has that flashy skill set in him, but I do think that he can play somewhat of a pressure role, get to the feet of the pack and certainly provide an outlet with some hard running. And he did that really well on the weekend. It's fantastic that he was able to come in his first game for the season, hasn't kicked a goal because he played defence for us last year, and put 2 on the board. So a fantastic Blake Drury game. Then I think, it was challenging to find a 1 vote, and you'd expect that when we had the game that we had. I thought LDU had a solid game. I thought Bailey Scott had a solid game. Sherry, had a solid game, but all of them had flaws in their game. So I've given the one vote to Tommy Powell. I thought he was our most consistent midfielder all day, found space when the others really struggled to and didn't bomb it. I thought he was relatively composed with the ball. 26 disposals, 9 marks, 4 tackles, 5 clearances, 6 inside 50s, and 3 goal assists for Tommy Powell. Just a really good all-round game, and his 50th game for the club too, 50th game for his career. So I think it's probably a good time to reflect on the fact that we are really impatient with some of our players, and someone like Tommy Powell, who's been on the list 3 or 4 years now, he's only now playing his 50th game, and there's plenty of players that need to play 50 or 60 before they're able to really blossom. I think we're seeing that from Tommy Powell this year. Hopefully we can see that from a couple more. But yeah, just a really good, solid game. Not a standout performance, but good enough for the one vote. And then, I could have raffled it for the Geelong players for their best on. I've given it to Jeremy Cameron, which is a pretty easy option. 21 disposals, 6 goals, 8 marks, 3 goal assists, and just did it effortlessly, really, unfortunately. Just another key forward that has taken our defenders for an absolute ride this year. He really did it all, as I said. 21 disposals shows that it wasn't just the 6 goals. He was marking it higher up the ground. He was bringing Neil and the other smaller forwards into the game. And I could have given it to Close as well. I mean, Close kicked 4 goals. Holmes is also good. He did a lot of good work through the midfield and kicked a couple of goals. Tommy Stewart was obviously fantastic off half back. So any of those sort of 4, and there's probably a handful of others that were really good performers for the Cats as well. But yeah, Jeremy Cameron, another tall forward to do us dirty. And then just to update the current standings on the North Podium, because I do post it on social media during the week, but I'm sure there'll be plenty of listeners that don't worry too much about that and just listen. So after 5 rounds, we've got Harry Sheezel on top of the podium on 14 votes, Tommy Powell in second on 10, and Tristan Sherry on 8 votes, who's in third spot. LDU's down on 5 votes in fourth, and then there's some others on 2s and 3s votes. So that's where it stands at the moment. She's is well out in front, and to be honest, probably could be a couple of extra votes ahead if I, wasn't careful and wasn't giving him best on every week, because he probably does deserve it most weeks. But I think that gives you a fair idea of Sheezel, Powell, Sherry, LDU have been our most consistent performance. LDU has been close to votes, sort of our 5th or 6th best a couple of times. We know he's got flaws in his game, but he and Powell have been our best midfielders quite easily. And yeah, she's no doubt has been our best player. So that's how it stands after 5 weeks. Before I jump into the positives and negatives, just my weekly call out. If you could share this podcast, North Pod, with any fans that you know, help me get the word out there. I do really appreciate the support from all the listeners every week. And if you do ever want to get in touch with the show, North Pod Show on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, all of those channels. I certainly post more regularly on Twitter and Instagram, and then some of the other content ends up on TikTok as well. So yeah, really appreciate all the follows and the comments and the likes on those social channels. It does help the show grow and help others to find out about the show. And if you are able to write a review and give the show a rating on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, I would really appreciate it. Also, if you'd like to support the show, you can buy me a coffee, which I'll use to buy a Coke. Just a way to support the show and show your support for me. You can find all those links, including the Buy Me a Coffee link, in the episode description or on my social medias at NorthPod Show. So, with all of that being said, we do need to talk about some negatives. It's always hard to narrow it down to 3 when the game goes like that, but I did manage to do it. Guess what? You're never going to believe it, but our inside 50 efficiency was awful again, 35.6%, which I think is the lowest for the year. I think we've been in the high 30s, low 40s every week. We're into the mid-30s, everyone. We've found a new rock bottom. 59% for the Cats, which is pretty consistent for us that our opposition's going at the high 50s, low 60s. They're always about 20% better than us. This was nearly essentially 25% better. So I guess to put that in perspective, it doesn't seem like a lot, but when they're having 15 or 16 more inside 50s and those inside 50s are resulting in a score 25% more of the time, that's how we end up losing by 75 points. Just some really, really bad entries going inside 50 for us. I thought or I hoped that things might be a little different with a different forward line look because, over the last 2 or 3 weeks now, we've had CCJ go out and now we've had Zerha and Stevo go out. So we've got Greenwood, Sellers, Drury in there. Relatively, it's half the group's changed. So part of me hoped that our efficiency would at least change, but yeah, it's not good. And I think there are forward and midfield issues to unpack there. I really liked the fact that Jai Simpkin played a little bit more midfield time. I don't know if that was due to the fact that McKercher was subbed out with a rib issue. But regardless, I do think Simpkin needs to spend a bit more time in the midfield for the benefit of our midfield and also for the benefit of him. However, he had some of the worst inside 50s for the team. I reckon he had 3 direct turnovers going inside 50. And we know that kicking is not a strength of his, but just to see him flat out turn it over to opposition 3 times as the captain in a game where things aren't going well, it's disappointing. So he's probably a symptom of a larger issue or a poster child for a larger issue. He went at 53% disposal efficiency. He has to be better, but as I say, there's a larger problem there. It's not just him. Team-wide, when we go short, we seem to just miss the kick. When we kick long, we've either been too slow in the build-up and the opposition interceptors have out-positioned us, or we give it far too much height and make it really easy for the opposition players to spoil it. It's just any way you cut it, our effectiveness inside 50 is not good. And then as soon as the ball hits the ground, we just, for whatever reason, I think there's a lot of elements to it, but we are just unable to keep the ball in there. We don't have the system or the players to pressure that ball and allow it to stay where it needs to inside 50. So yeah, there's a lot to work on in terms of our entries inside 50 and then what happens after the ball gets in there. We did have 11 marks inside 50 this week, which is better than we've been doing, but Geelong had 22. And I think, what more do I need to say about that, really? So, yeah, the inside 50 efficiency is a big, big worry. And I worry about how many inside 50s we're going to need to have to kick a winning score at this point because our efficiency is just so poor. Second negative, just too many simple mistakes that cost us at costly times and in dangerous positions on the ground. So, sure, Simpkin turned it over going inside 50. That's the best place to turn it over, particularly if it's a slow turnover. But our turnovers were not limited to that. We turned it over everywhere. And this is not about having a go at particular players. It's just reality. So Biggie Newen and Charlie Comben had some shockers, really poor kicks that just got immediately turned over. I think they both had 2 each. They had some great moments today, don't get me wrong. They did some good spoiling. They did some good intercepting. So defensively, I thought they did some good things, but when they've got the ball in their hands, they really need to pick off the right kick at the moment. They're still developing as defenders, both of them, and you have to understand that when you've got the ball in your hands inside 50, unless you know you can make that kick, you can't go for it. I know we're trying to play this aggressive North ball style, but we've got to know who can bite those kicks off and who can't. So Biggie and Comben, similar to Simpkin, are probably symptomatic of a larger problem in that we try to bite those short, incisive kicks off and really just pinpoint opposition players time and time again. There was some shocking exiting defensive 50 turnovers, and when you turn it over there, it just makes it so easy for the opposition to score. We did that. a lot today. We really want to be turning it over. Ideally, not at all. That would be amazing. But if we're going to turn it over, let's do it in our forward 50 rather than in our defensive 50 or right on the arc, because we saw Geelong transition to some of the easiest goals you'll ever see, just because of where the ball was turned over and how it was turned over. If Comben and Biggie can't bite off the kick, I know we don't want to see that David Noble style, just kick it to the wing, but at least if we kick it to there, we've got half a chance to set up our defence and stop it when it comes back. We know that Cherry's working on his marking game. He only had one today, so that's still a work in progress. We need him to be more of a marking option down the line, but at least, Comben and Biggie just need to know their limits at the moment. I do think that both of them could be, solid kicks in the future, but they don't have those short kicks in them all the time. Let's try and get it into Zach Fisher's hands more. Like, Sheezel couldn't possibly possess it anymore. We saw Fisher handling it a lot in the preseason, and he seems to, for whatever reason, has not been as impactful now that the season started proper. I think it needs to be in his hands more. Sure, he's got a bit of Aaron Hall in him. I think sometimes he can absolutely butcher it, but I think 8 or 9 times out of 10, he is able to bite off a pretty decent kick or, get the ball moving with his pace and then find a target. So that's kind of what I'd like to see more, as opposed to Comben and Biggie trying to bite off these really tricky short kicks. And the third and final main negative, it's something that I think we as North fans have been putting up with for the last 5 years or so. It's an age-old North Melbourne specialty. It's the late quarter goals, the red time goals. The last quarter was the only quarter of this game that we didn't concede a goal in the last minute. And it's just been such a consistent problem over several years. It's cost us in those closer games that we've had over the past couple of years, because we've played, 95% of a good quarter, and then at the end we just seem to, for whatever reason, mentally, physically be unable to just shut things down for the end of the quarter. Everyone knows how long's left each quarter. Like, sure, they can't see the countdown clock, but the messages come out from the bench and from runners. They know, give or take 30 seconds, how long's left. But for whatever reason, we are just elite at saying to the opposition, you know what, have a goal at the end of the quarter. It's on us. And as I said, like, when we've been in these other games last year, those sorts of goals are the ones that have cost us opportunities to take home the 4 points. Not only that, I think it comes down to a lack of communication and leadership on field. I think it's a big part of why when the games have gotten close and, we've either had a slender lead or we're trying to facilitate a come from behind victory, we struggle, because when the game is simplified, teams find ways to beat us and to break us down. And that is either late game situations or late quarter situations, when the game plan becomes either defend or let's go hell for leather. And for whatever reason, we are just unable to defend that at the moment. Our leaders and our on-field leaders need to be better at communicating and just, and figuring out how to stifle the opposition so that they aren't able to kick these late goals, because they're just absolute backbreakers. So players like Simpkin and LDU, Core, McDonald, Tucker, Fisher, Greenwood, Larkey, these players that have experience need to be the ones that are leading in those situations and communicating to the younger group like how to execute the game plan so this doesn't happen. Because I am certain that if we could have a look at Clarko's whiteboard, it doesn't say just relax, it's the end of the quarter, start saving your petrol tickets. I'm certain it doesn't say that, but for whatever reason we just we're unable to stop those red time goals. And there was 3 quarters in this game where that happened. And, if you take those 3 or 4 goals away, sure, it's still a big margin, but it does take a real bite out of it takes a bit of the sting out, I suppose, what I'm trying to say there. In terms of other stray thoughts, I mean, Sellers had 1 touch and it was a turnover, a really unfortunate debut for him. I will talk about him a little bit later, but, I think it's unfortunate when a player has a bit of a hyped debut, and it's such a positive story, and he wasn't able to impact the game. So that's unfortunate and also a worry, but possibly a timely reminder for us that he's not the saviour. He's been a VFL player for a reason. He may well go on to have a really solid career for us, but I just find it really hard to believe that he's going to be a superstar, and I think everyone probably understands that, or certainly does after today. That being said, Nick Larkey had a pretty bad debut game too, and he's turned out to be okay. So I'm not angry with Sellers. I'm not having a go at him. It's just, obviously it's all up for here from him, and, I think it's a good reminder that he's not the saviour, but he's some great depth for us there. McKercher's injury, so if you didn't catch it, he appeared to have a rib injury. I haven't got an update on that or seen an update from the club, but hopefully it's nothing too serious and he's either good for next week or he only misses a couple of games. That incident was towards the end of the first quarter, so he really didn't play much of the game, and he's obviously someone that we want to keep getting minutes into, so that's no good. And I think similar to McKercher, Dersma seems to be finding it really tough with the service that he's getting at the moment. He had another pretty quiet game. And again, it's not a slight on him. Like, he's a young bloke just trying to ply his trade in one of the hardest positions on the ground to play. So, I wouldn't begrudge him or the club if he found himself in the twos in the next couple of weeks because he's just not able to find the footy at AFL level. But I do also hope that with our schedule lightening up a little, it might give someone like him a bit more of an opportunity because, he's really been starved the last couple of weeks. In terms of positives, as you can imagine, and as I feel like I'm on repeat for this, it was a challenge to find some positives, but I think I've been able to. We did see some flashes of brilliance throughout the game, particularly from those younger players. Georgie Wardlaw had a fantastic sequence down the wing with just a second and a third effort. He just kept moving the ball forward. And, in that classic vintage George Wardlaw way, it was chaotic, but, he was a maniac. He was emphatic. He just really wanted to get that ball forward. And I think he won a free kick for high contact, sort of on the forward 50 line, but that was kind of simultaneous with him dishing out an unreal handball. He shows flashes of brilliance, George, and we just need to see more of that each week. He's still such a young player, and we have to remember that when we're setting expectations for him, he's played 12 odd games. He's got so much growth in him, but for him, it's just going to be building that tank and building that consistency and trust in his body. So great to see some highlights from him. Charlie Comben and Biggie, I mentioned earlier on, they had some great intercepts. They showed better decision making, when to go and when to stay at home, I thought. And they had some good spoils. Both of them took a few good marks. As I said, they did have some turnovers by foot, but I thought defensively they played a solid game together, and particularly Biggie in his second AFL game and first for the club. I thought, he really impressed me in particular, just based on my expectations. I think I've had pretty low expectations for him, but I thought that what he showed on the weekend definitely gave me the impression that, there's somewhat of a future for him. Whether or not he's a long-term player or a bit of a stopgap, probably a little early to say, but there's certainly some potential there. Paul Curtis had a fantastic don't argue in the last quarter, which led to Eddie Ford's goal. He presented really well all day, Paul Curtis. Didn't always go his way, but I thought he was an option at times. And we keep seeing these moments of brilliance. We know he had a goal of the year contender last year that involved a fend-off or two. He's such a strong player for his size, Paul Curtis. And I think they're the kind of things that we have to take some solace from and see the positives in. I do at times find it much easier to dwell on the negatives because they're more glaring, but it is important that we recognise that, those little green shoots with Wardlaw and Comben and Biggie and Paul Curtis and Drury and Ford from today's game, there's a lot to like there. It's just growing that positivity and making that a more consistent feature of our game, because at the moment where we're falling down is we're too error prone and we're too few and far between in terms of when the positives are happening. So great that we were able to see some of those green shoots Second positive, after quarter one, we were able to play that uncontested marking game a couple of times, and you could kind of see our confidence in it growing across the game. I wouldn't say that it got better, but we were able to execute it a couple of times, and we got it further up the ground as the game went on. I thought it was just, some really challenging turnovers through skill errors that cost us, but I do think game plan wise, we obviously identified that's something that could potentially hurt Geelong. And if we were good enough to execute that across the game, it's a different story. We're just not. But strategically, I thought it made sense. And, when we were able to get it into the right players' hands, it worked. Whereas quarter one, we just couldn't. We couldn't get an uncontested possession to save our lives. We couldn't control the pace at all. Geelong's pressure just forced all of our possessions and disposals to be rushed. So after quarter one, I thought we were able to slow it down a little bit and play it a little bit more at our pace. We executed some switches really well, and we're able to progress the ball up the field with a couple of those. I thought we were looking to bite off the right kicks most of the time, and it's actually quite different to that style of play that we've been toying with earlier in the year, that North ball. It was a much more measured approach. And as I said, it definitely had issues. We weren't able to execute it completely, but I do think there were signs there where if we're able to get a couple more good kickers and, develop those that have a decent kick like Biggie and Chom into better kicks, I think there's potential there. I think we're probably 15% off, which, seems like a lot, but, with a couple of different players in there and a couple of years of development, there's absolutely the opportunity for that to get a lot better. So, look, positive that we have that flexibility in our game, I suppose, so that we're able to, not just go the frenetic pace. We showed that we're able to play a different way against Geelong, and there were signs that it could work. We're just not good enough to execute it at the moment. And positive 3, this one is a cop-out, but I'm going to take it because I have to, and it's hard to find positives at the moment with this football club. I didn't have to watch it live. I actually had a family gathering that I had to attend instead, so there was no danger of me heading down to Geelong. I didn't have to watch it in person, and I actually didn't even get to watch it live as I was in a park at the time. I did get the pleasure of going home and watching it then afterwards, but I think it was easier to kind of just dissociate when I knew the result. I knew it wasn't going to be good. You can just kind of analyse the game a little differently. I didn't take every goal so personally, I guess, and it was an interesting way to watch the game. Obviously not my preference. I'd prefer to win and I'd prefer to be watching, but when you're getting belted like this, you don't mind missing that live experience because it just seemed like social media-wise, it was a bit of a dumpster fire, and fair enough. Look, we're light on for positives this week with 3 beltings in 3 weeks, so you'll excuse me if I phone that one in a little bit. Some stray thoughts. Look, the young mids got some more time at Sherry's feet. I wouldn't say that they were close to winning the contest. As I said, I thought we got belted in that department, but more time, building that chemistry with Sherry and the young midfielders can only be positive. I thought, Biggie might be able to be a third tall defender option for us, which is a positive. I didn't, know that he had that kind of potential in him, I suppose. I didn't see it in the preseason, but I did see it against Geelong. And we didn't have to watch Tom Hawkins ragdoll us. We got Shannon Neal instead, who kicked 3. But, I think Hawkins would have had an absolute field day because there's just no way that Comben, Biggie and Core could have taken on both of them and had any level of success. So, look, Shannon Neal still was running around looking pretty good out there, but at least it wasn't Tommy Hawkins. And I don't know about you, but I just couldn't hear Shannon Neal without thinking of Shannon Knoll. Obviously, the names are very similar, but just every time he kicked it, I'm thinking, what about me? And probably Shannon Neal's probably thinking, what about me most of the time in the reserves? He's probably waiting for Tomahawk to retire, which cannot be far away. I think most opposition teams are waiting for that too. So we're there with you, Shannon Neal. I support your cause because I cannot wait to see the back of Tommy Hawkins. He's a lovely bloke. He just towels us up most times at the moment. There is the positives and negatives. I'm going to whip through the VFL news, so to speak. We had a 1-point win over Brisbane, a very fortunate win. It was 76-75. Sam Lowson kicked a late goal, which was his fourth, to win the game for us. And yeah, all major stats were lost for us except that final score. Brisbane were very inaccurate. They kicked 9 goals, 21. So pretty fortunate to win. If they were able to kick even slightly straighter, we don't win it. They were pretty dominant around the ground. But a win is a win. So the reserves are 3 from 3, which at least one of our sides is, off to a winning start. In terms of players that, were okay and potentially banging down the door, or at least knocking on it, Will Phil had 21 disposals, 12 tackles, 4 clearances, and yeah, I'd say was the best midfielder for us. Braden George had 20 disposals down back. Riley Hardiman had 18 disposals down back, so it's good to see them getting some more disposals and some more time into their legs. Curtis Taylor and Slevo kicked 2 each, so it's nice that they were at least able to hit the scoreboard a little. I don't know that 2 goals is going to get it done for Slevo in terms of returning based on the output of Blake Drury, but you'd prefer him to go back and start in some positive form. So certainly no one from the VFL that you'd say are absolutely shoo-ins to replace anyone in the senior side, but there's a couple there that, I'll talk about in a minute in terms of who I'd like to see in. And look, winning form is good form in the VFL. We want that. Next week, we have a super, super, super important game. This is my last topic for the podcast, so apologies if it's running a little long. It's always a challenge to condense all of my thoughts, and I can ramble a bit, I think, particularly when there's so many negative things to address. It's a big game this week, Sunday, 21st of April, 4 o'clock against the Hawks at Marvel. Both teams looking for their first wins. Whoever doesn't win is going to be the last side left that is winless after the Eagles upset Richmond on Sunday, which really puts us to shame a little bit. I was, pretty optimistic about the way the Eagles started the year, but their last 2 games, they've been pretty competitive. And then, they've beaten the Tigers, who are certainly not going to be a good side this year. But, the fact that the Eagles have won a game is a lot better than we've been able to muster this year. So the Hawks are in horrific form just like us. They got belted by the Suns this week. It can go one of 2 ways, this is the sort of game that's going to either give us some positivity and some momentum, or is going to be absolutely demoralising. And I think we all know which way we would like that to go. I think early vibes to me, obviously I don't know in terms of injuries and whether or not someone like Colby McKercher is going to get up, and whether Zerha and Sheezel and Dawson are going to be fit. But just based on what I'm thinking, look, Sellers, I know he had a shocker. He deserves another game or 2. So I really do think and hope that he will stay in for a couple of weeks, and hopefully a game like this against the Hawks, he's able to build a little bit of confidence, even if it's not hitting the scoreboard, at least just getting a couple of, decent touches. Drury definitely deserves to stay in the side for a couple of weeks, like I mentioned. I would love to get Will Phil in the side. I know that he's not absolutely lighting it up at the VFL, but I think there's potential for him to really impact our stoppage game positively. So maybe the McKercher injury, if he's unavailable, sort of gives a bit of opportunity there. There'd obviously need to be a bit of shuffling there, because McKercher's been playing mostly half-back with a little bit of midfield time, but I'm sure we can shuffle around and make that work. And Will Phil was at least emergency this week. That being said, Lazaro came in for Shields without even being in the listed players. So, look, I don't know how close he is, but I would love to see him in there soon. I think if Dawson's fit, he definitely plays. So whether or not it's Biggie or Core that make way, look, I think long-term Biggie's going to, probably be the player that we want to see. But this week against Hawthorn in a really potentially winnable game, I'd probably prefer, if Dawson's fit, to stay with Core, because I think Core is going to be more reliable. Don't get me wrong, Core has not had a good start to the year, but, I just think Biggie is going to be really up and down. And so whilst he was mostly up with some bad turnovers this week, next week could be awful potentially. And that's not a slight on him. He's a young player. He's played 2 AFL games. So look, I could go either way on that. I would totally understand if Dawson's fit, if Biggie did stay in the side. But I do think the fact that Cause and the leadership group probably keeps him in the side, whether or not you like that or appreciate that, I'll leave that with you. But that's just what I think. It might be irrelevant because Dawson might not be fit anyway. I'm not too sure how long to expect him to be out, but I definitely think if he is fit, he comes back in. And I think that's all of my early thoughts. I know it's hard for me to do a proper preview before the week's transpired, but I think generally speaking, that's what I'm looking for. I'm really hoping that our midfield group is able to be more competitive against the Hawks and give our forwards a chance this week. And in the same breath, I do hope that those forwards are able to take their opportunities a little more aggressively and potently. But look, I know that there'd be a lot of North fans that are going, this is our game, this is our chance, and it's hard to disagree with that. I just really need us to temper that as an expectation. We can have it as a desire, we can have it as I really want that to happen, but there is absolutely it's not a certainty that we're going to beat the Hawks this weekend, and I really hope that if we don't win, it doesn't become a bloodbath on social media. We've got to stick together, North fans. There's just no point in, dropping our heads. We've been here for 4.5, 5 years. However long it takes, it's going to take. And I know it feels like a massive rebuild at the moment, and it feels like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, and I feel that watching the games. But as I said earlier, there are some green shoots there in our young players. We just have to stay ridiculously patient. So I hope that you're able to stay that way with me, but I would understand if you're not. I do hope that everyone has a fantastic week. Sorry that my voice has failed me a little, and I'm probably sounding tired for a variety of reasons. You have a great week. Let's touch base after the Hawthorn game, and I hope that at the very minimum we've played a competitive game and we've got some strong positives to talk about. But look, let's wait and see. Go North, and speak to the week. Thanks for listening to another episode of North Pod. If you give me a rating or review on your podcast service, that would be much appreciated. And please follow me on all social media at North Pod Show. I'm on X or Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and I'm also very active on the North Melbourne subreddit. Hope you'll join me for the next episode.